Holy bone. Come and check out my holy bone.
I can't believe I was so filled with rage I did not come to the joke holy bone on my own. That's so funny.
Wait, what did it really mean again?
Sacrum meaning sacred.
Oh, a holy bone.
Yes.
Holy bone.
Hi everyone, this is Jake. Today, Brooke and I are going to continue discussing Dobson's book, Bringing Up Boys. This time, though, we're going to look at how it reflects and influenced the culture of early 2000s evangelicalism. So along with the general content warning that goes with the show, I wanted to give another one. We're going to talk about homophobia, misogyny, sexual abuse, and eugenics pretty much throughout this entire episode, so it can get pretty rough at times. We still manage to have fun and make jokes, but please, take care of yourselves. And with that, on with the show. And welcome to I Hate James Dobson, a podcast secretly about fascism. As always, I am Jake, and I'm joined by the peanut butter to my cheese, the astounding Brooke. Brooke, how are you doing after part one?
I'm gonna be honest, I'm a little drunk.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, that is exactly how you need to be for this next part.
Is it still the same book?
It's the same book.
Oh, God,
So,
okay.
we talked about the arguments in part one. Boys and girls are fundamentally different. Socialists, feminists, and homosexual activists have poisoned our culture and waged war against masculinity. Therefore, we need to teach boys to be real men again.
And we talked about the holy bone.
We talked a decent amount about the holy bone. This part, we're going to talk about it more from a cultural perspective, I guess. I'm starting up top, swinging right out the gate. This is a fascist text. This text fits directly into a fascist ideology. A little bit a hot take. So I'm going to explain what I mean by that, and then explain why I think that's important to say. If you'll excuse me, I'm a therapist, not a sociologist, but we're going to talk about what fascism is and isn't. What is fascism? Brooke, what is fascism? Okay. Fascism is a right-wing authoritarian ideology with a cult personality. Authoritarianism is that the government has a lot of control. The fact that it's right-wing means that there's a pretty strict hierarchy that we've talked a lot about Dobson's beliefs. But authoritarianism isn't fascism. Fascism is a unique flavor of authoritarianism. And that was a lot of the critiques that I got when I said Donald Trump is a fascist. People were like, no, he's just authoritarian, which is also bad, but no, he's also absolutely a fascist. I will also add that fascism takes on elements of the culture of origin. So Italian fascism under Mussolini looks different from German fascism under Hitler, looks different from American fascism under Trump. There's this quote often attributed to Louis Sinclair, although I don't think he actually originated it, that says, quote, "When fascism comes to America, it will come wrapped in the flag and waving the cross," end quote. To me, that's American fascism. That's Christian nationalism. That's what Dobson's advocating for here.
What is Antifa?
Antifa is anti-fascist. It is an ideology pushing back against fascism. And you do not join Antifa. There are just behaviors that you can take that are anti-fascist or not, that push back against fascism. That could be anything from directly protesting fascists to creating community support to stop the conditions from that create fascism from arising.
But Antifa is the enemy of Donald Trump, right? He's always talking about Antifa.
Oh boy, yes. And that actually fits really neatly into fascism.
Okay, because he's a fascist.
Because he's a fascist. Put a pin right in Antifa. We're going to come right back to it.
Great.
When you're looking at extremism, you want to look for three things: a need, a narrative, and a network. Typically, people do extreme things because there's some kind of need that they're trying to get met, usually humiliation. The people who did 9/11 were doing it because they felt the United States had humiliated them in their culture. Maybe they'd done it. You should not have done a 9/11, but like, sure. They're trying to restore a sense of pride. A network of people agreeing with you, supporting you, feeding you with this information, kind of in a feedback loop. And then a narrative. How do you get that need met? We're going to look at the story of fascism here, because I think we're reading stories. This is a text. How does this story fit into the story of fascism? The shortest definition of fascism I could give is palingenetic ultranationalism. But it's not the most succinct definition, because then I have to spend a lot of time saying what all those words mean. Palingenetic ultranationalism is the story that we, our people, our nation, us, were once great. However, they, in 3 brackets, have caused us to decay and fall, and now we must reassert our authority and make our people great again. Mm-hmm. Make America great again. It's literally just palingenetic ultranationalism. Donald Trump's Republican Party is just fascist. It just is. Argue with the wall. I don't care. I'm not here to convince you. But we're also here to explain it a little bit more. Fascism has particular story beats. The ones that I'm going to talk about come from a guy named Umberto Eco, who did a really good analysis of fascism. He's one of many scholars who research fascism. If you want to learn more, I very much recommend reading his stuff. He has these like traits of fascism. I'm going to talk about a couple of them that feel most applicable to this book. Obsession with a plot. And this is where the Antifa bit comes in for Donald Trump. Because Antifa is not like an actual thing, because the deep state is not like a quantifiable entity, you can always be on the search for Antifa. You can always be looking for the deep state. You can always be trying to drain the swamp, whatever it is. It's not about actually doing it. It's about the plot to get you there. And that's why Donald Trump picks these enemies like Antifa. The enemy is both weak and strong. Antifa is, on one hand, a bunch of liberal little pussies with blue hair, but also going to destroy the culture unless we kill them.
Yeah.
An appeal to a frustrated middle class. We saw this with Dobson in What Wives... whatever. A lot of the solutions he gave were like, well, that's fine if you're like privileged,
Right.
but like, how does it apply to other people? He's not trying to apply to other people. It's about the middle class, because fascism is also inherently about capitalism. A rejection of modernism or postmodernism, modern values, essentially trying to restore the tradition, whatever that may be. Anti-intellectualism, and importantly, machismo, obsession with masculinity. That's where we're going to start with a book literally called Bringing Up Boys. Is Dobson's idea of what masculinity is. This book isn't the entirety of fascism. Fascism is not the entirety of this book. But I want to point out how well this fits into a broader fascist story and how it helped lay the groundwork for the evangelicals' embrace of Trump. So, specifically, it's cute. Bring Up Boys, its shorthand is Bub.
Aww.
So how Bub fits into the fascist narratives.
Bubby.
Palingenetic ultranationalism. Some pretty damning quotes. Quote, I believe the future of Western civilization, us, our people, not the gays, not the black people, not the feminists, the real Western civilization, depends on how well we handle the breakdown of the nuclear family. Nations that are populated largely by immature, immoral, weak-willed, cowardly, and self-indulgent men cannot and will not long endure. Okay, so first of all, we have this idea of like cultural decay. We need to make men great again to make our country great again.
Right.
But also, immature, cowardly, self-indulgent Dobson. The call is coming from inside the house. We had this quote in the last episode, but this God-ordained institution of marriage, which has prevailed in almost every culture for more than 5,000 years, is unraveling right in front of our eyes. We made fun of the 5,000 years thing before. This is why he's doing it, to connect you to history, to say our lineage, our people, we come from a proud tradition of the Greeks and the Romans, who were good Christian people, and definitely not the ones who created gay sex. They have some truth that we have now lost through their words, through their beliefs. We're trying to go back to that. Their idea of marriage was correct, and we have now lost it because of the feminists. Obsession with the plot. They're doing this on purpose. That was a whole section from our last episode. We're going to get into this more in the second part of this episode, but he cites some childhood sexual abuse statistics. I'm going to get into that a little bit. It's not the most important part, but I do want to talk about it, and it's kind of upsetting. So if you want to just skip ahead, skip like a minute or two, we'll be back. He says that, quote, the average pedophile captures and exploits 150 children during his career.
What?
That's not how child sexual abuse works.
No.
He got this from one study that interviewed 8 people in a jail for crimes against children. I first of all, bad methodology, but also most people who commit child sexual abuse are not caught for various reasons. So no. But he's creating this picture of like stranger danger. It's the other.
I was just about to say, it's this idea of like this criminal person, right?
Yes.
And it's like, nope, it's someone in your house.
Yes.
Right.
He also pretty directly equates queer people with pedophiles.
Okay.
Just enough plausible deniability that if I were to say Dobson says all queer people are pedophiles, I could be sued for libel. Even though that's absolutely like the meaning of his words, he does not say those words together. So we know that 75% of adolescents who have been sexually assaulted were victimized by someone that they know well.
Right.
If trans people wanted to groom your kids, they wouldn't spend years taking hormones, spending countless amounts of money on surgeries, struggling with an ever-worsening socio-political landscape. No. They join your church and become a youth pastor.
Absolutely.
But it's obsession with the plot. It's the other. They are invading us. They're trying to hurt us. Mm-hmm. That's the important part of the fascist narrative. The enemy is both weak and strong. The most salient example of this to me is women are weak, and that's why they aren't CEOs, but they also have enough power to hijack the entire government in Hollywood.
Right, yeah.
Appeal to a frustrated middle class. We saw this with our last one. He makes, in this book, a somewhat decent argument for universal basic income. He talks about how, quote, the United States Congress should provide tax credits and other incentives for mothers or fathers who choose to stay at home. Why have they not done so to this point? Because they want the tax revenues that come from two-income families and because they are lobbied heavily by feminists and others who want the advantage to go towards the employed mothers. So first of all, again, we're getting the strong, weak thing. Uh-huh. But I do think that stay-at-home parents should be compensated by the government because that is absolutely a fucking job.
Yeah.
So, again, appeal to the middle class, that is the thing. That was also a big part of Donald Trump's appeal, especially in 2016. Yeah, it was very much the racism and the culture war, but he did have decent economic proposals that he did not follow through on, but decent economic proposals to appeal to the middle class.
Right.
Also, fascists never actually do that. Fascism isn't just motivated by hate. It purports to make life better for the good ones. You know, it's almost a type of socialism, but, you know, dependent on the conformity to the group. So a type of socialism, but limited towards the people of our nation, like a national socialism, if you will.
This is the part of the podcast where I've just gone completely silent.
Ultimately, though, still defends capitalism. In every book so far, he's had a little rant about how capitalism is ultimately good. Has another one here. He has this quote, one of the most common complaints made by the business community is that too many kids won't work, or even if they will, they don't know how to. This is a quote by Dennis Prager. Dennis Prager is the face of the YouTube channel PragerU, which is an oil billionaire-funded climate denialist propaganda channel that is now legally considered part of the curriculum for schools in Florida, Oklahoma, and Montana.
Oh my God.
Yeah. There's modern-day evil people referenced all throughout this book. He spends a lot of time talking about Hillary Clinton. I did not include this in this because it wasn't relevant to the overall story, but mentions her a number of times.
But they're so afraid of Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. But ultimately, it's that fascism is the thing. That fascism defends capitalism. That's the purpose of fascism. It's for the people up top to maintain power, because fascism isn't actually about purity. It's about power and control. Rejection of progressivism, modernism, postmodernism, whatever word you want. Rejection of like our modern morals, and also disagreement is treason. These are two things I put together because he goes on another rant about postmodernism where he says nothing is right or wrong, nothing is good or evil, nothing is positive or negative, everything is relative. That's what they're teaching your kids. That's how they're going to destroy the country.
Right.
And first of all, no. But also he talks about moral relativism. Quick, Good Place 101 moral relativism. It's that different situations require different ethical decisions. You cannot have one set rule for any across the board. Brooke, is it wrong to kill someone?
Yes.
Yes. Is the death penalty morally wrong? What if you're defending yourself? What even counts as killing someone? But it depends on the situation. And even if you personally have answers to these questions, is the death penalty defensible? I would say no. You can at least understand that there's some debate, that different people disagree, and aren't horribly evil people for doing so. That's moral relativism. Dobson doesn't want to acknowledge that, because if you have this black and white thinking, here are the rules, here are the standards, then anyone who disagrees with you is wrong. And not only is wrong, is evil for doing so.
Yeah, you're right. And this is also how we then get back into the question of abortion, right? Because if you have a black and white idea of what killing someone is.
I see this personally, and I've seen this a lot in my experience when it comes to gay shit, because that is my primary experience. And it's that if you think that gay people aren't directly going to hell, not only do I think you're wrong, you're not even really a Christian. Disagreement is treason, and a rejection of modern ideals and morals. All throughout this book, all throughout fascist ideologies. Anti-intellectualism. Don't trust scientists. Quote, parents should be very skeptical of what they read about family life in the press and even in scientific journals. There are influential professionals out there who despise their traditional family, and they're producing contrived evidence to weaken it. I also would say the obsession with homeschooling counts as this as well. Don't trust the people who've gone to school to specifically teach people. No. You can do it.
I think that he's basically saying, like, don't trust this research, don't trust these things. That he's also presenting us from his point of view. He's like, but do trust mine.
Well, because he's not biased.
Right. That's
Clearly.
right. Oh, yeah, that's right.
And then machismo and the obsession with masculinity. I literally just wrote this entire book. And Dobson's worldview, basically.
Yeah.
The world doesn't actually fit into the hierarchy desired by fascists. And therefore, violence and the threat of it are used to ensure compliance. Dobson has been more folksy than overtly violent so far, generally. But it's always there, boiling right under the surface. And I think there's a quote that I think is particularly illustrative of this. He's complaining about movie scenes where women fight men and win. Quote, it has the potential, however, to be very counterproductive for women. One of the absolutes in culture is that a man is never justified in hitting a woman, and for a good reason. Women are not as strong as men and must be protected from male brutality. Leaving aside the infantilism for a second, but when girls are shown holding their own and knocking out men twice their size, it undermines the rationale for the prohibition of violence of any sort against females, where in marriage or anywhere else. And I can only read that as a threat.
Yeah.
Like, that is just a violent threat.
I mean, that's horrifying.
Oh, yeah. There's been some that I screamed after I read them. This one just made me very upset.
Yeah, it's really disturbing.
He also does take a little bit of a Freudian twist on something at one point. He says, quote, a little boy achieves male maturity over his mother's dead body. And don't forget it, he doesn't just kill her, he stabs her slowly. Killing is the little boy who said, your breath stinks. This is his way of establishing masculinity. But, first of all, Freudian psychoanalysis is bullshit.
Yeah.
But two, it's also deeply violent. And that violence, again, is bubbling right under the surface at all times. Which brings us to the main event of this episode. The only chapter we're going to go through bit by bit. Chapter 9, The Origins of Homosexuality.
Oh, no. Jake.
And however upsetting you think it is even more upsetting than that.
Oh, God. Should I pour... Okay, no, I still have some. All right. I might dissociate during this, so just... But I'm here.
Introduction. Labeling this book as a pre-fascist text is not only intellectually honest, in my opinion, I also think it really illustrates the fascist narratives, as well as gives lie to the true motivation of fascism, which is violence and control. And this chapter is a perfect case study. I know my parents read a lot of Dobson and his contemporaries while I was growing up, and I don't always know what titles they were reading. However, I do know for a fact that my parents had this book in their house, because I found it on their bookshelves when I was home for college I think it was a winter break. And I vividly remember sitting on the carpet of their basement, reading this specific chapter in shock and horror. Listeners, I know we've talked about some awful shit in the past, but this is an entire episode all about it, so strap in, strap on, let's begin. This story begins with a probably fake letter by a kid, I think his name is Mike. But like with most things Dobson does, feels like a parable.
Yeah.
But also, when I read it, I could have written it. It ends with, quote, I'm afraid if I am not straight, I will go to hell. I do not want to be not straight. I don't try to be not straight. I love God and want to go to heaven. If there's something wrong with me, I want to get rid of it. Please help me. A letter from a 13-year-old boy.
Oh.
Before we get into the depths of it, How would you actually help a 13-year-old boy coming into understanding of his queerness and also grappling with his faith? Just you personally.
I mean, obviously I have to think deeply about this idea of like, for me, the piece of grappling with his faith is the one less familiar to me, right? Mm. But as queer affirming therapists, right, like obviously what I do with any client who is coming into an understanding of their sexuality is try to celebrate it, try to understand that it's okay, that it's normal. I would try to help this young person with his desire to resist it, right? And resource him as much as I could with support.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is very much what I wrote down here. It's not evil to be not straight, for whatever that means. And there are absolutely many strains and sects of Christianity where that's okay, celebrated, tolerated, choose your flavor. But what I would say is, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, which is a Bible quote. That includes being gay. And however you want to navigate that, you cannot hate yourself for that.
And listen to what the kid writes. I don't want this. I'm not trying to do this. I mean, this kid that Dobson's using as an example in his book is proving the idea that this is not a choice. Mm-hmm. Right?
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay. Yeah.
I know from firsthand experience, it does raise a lot of like, well, what does it mean to love? What does it mean to be good? What is God? Those are hard questions for anyone to answer, let alone a 13-year-old kid. Our goal as therapists is not to give them answers. It's to hold space as they try to understand it for themselves. And
right.
I can disagree with your interpretation, but hating yourself is just destructive and counterproductive. You'll be shocked to hear that Dobson disagrees with this. Dobson's argument is that homosexuality is a medical disorder that can and should be cured.
Uh-huh. That's worked so well in the past, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Quote, what do we know about this disorder? Well, first, it is a disorder, despite the denials from the APA. Great political pressures were exerted on this professional organization by the gays and lesbians, some of whom are psychiatrists, to declare homosexuality to be normal. Finally, decision in 1973 to remove this condition from the DSM. It was not made with the basis of scientific evidence, but was strongly influenced by a poll of APA members, which was initiated and financed by the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. No.
Right.
Also, Dobson, I wish the gays had that much influence over things.
Seriously.
Oh my God. No. What makes a disorder? This is another question for us to discuss as mental health professionals. What makes something a disorder? Dobson does not clarify.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a whole podcast in itself, right? And like, what is a diagnosis? What is a mental health diagnosis?
Yeah.
Who decides that? Who decides the factors of that? It's tricky to begin with.
What do you look for? Not as like all cases, absolutely, but like just generally.
I think I look for the effect it has on the person's life. Mm-hmm. Right? If someone's describing something that sounds like something I recognize from the DSM and they're describing a huge negative impact on their life. But I'm not looking to find the label of the disorder for them. And I tell my clients this, right? It's like, what's that going to do? Like, what we're looking for is like, all right, then how can we reduce the distress in your life?
Yeah, that's what I look for. Clinically significant distress is a big diagnostic criteria in a lot of things. I believe Wikipedia says clinically significant disturbance in an individual's cognition, meaning thoughts, emotional regulation, or behavior. Yeah. It is usually associated with distress or impairment in important areas of functioning.
Right.
Right. I know that being gay is not a disorder because I'm able to openly live as queer and I don't engage in statistically significant types of self-harm. My cognitions, my thoughts, and my emotional regulation is fine. I don't experience distress because of my identity. I am highly functional. I have a job, degrees, friends, romantic relationships, hobbies. I exercise, whatever, pick your thing. Being queer just isn't a disorder. It isn't. And Dobson's, he comes from the idea that it is, the Bible says it's wrong, and therefore it has to be wrong. Yeah. But that's not a scientific argument. The
distress that I feel connected to my identity, which I'm sure you do as well, comes from other people's issues with it, especially people like James Dobson, right?
Absolutely.
It's not actually internal. It is not my fight with myself. It is other people's opinions around my identity that cause distress.
Queer youth, especially trans youth, have statistically higher self-harm, suicidal ideation, and suicide rates. That is true. But when a trans kid comes out in an environment that is accepting, they're able to get whatever healthcare feels appropriate for them. And not just family, but school, and also the broader community. If that is accepting, the disparities in mental health pretty much disappear.
Right.
The things that you would point to say that is disorder go away when the social influence is accounted for. That is not true for depression. You can have the most loving, accepting family in the world, but if you have depression, you're just going to be depressed.
Yeah.
The problem is depression, not the other people.
Right. And this is, again, this is where the arguments around diagnosis come in, right? Because if people come to me and think that they have, and they might, right, that they have ADHD or OCD or a lot of other things, but they're not really experiencing any distress from it, right? Then the conversation becomes all right, well, why would this diagnosis be meaningful to you, right? What are you looking for from this? Mm-hmm. But it's when it's hey, I can't, control my thoughts or function at my job, right? That's when we have to look at it.
Yeah. So if it's a disorder, what causes homosexuality? Uh-huh. Dobson concedes that being gay isn't a choice.
Oh.
Quote, in a very infantilizing way, which is not surprising. Quote, whom among us would knowingly choose a path that would result in alienation from family, rejection from friends, disdain from the heterosexual world, exposure to sexually transmitted diseases such as AIDS and tuberculosis, and even a shorter lifespan?
Okay.
So, I definitely did not choose to be queer, but also it's pretty fucking rad.
Yeah.
I encourage people to try it out sometime.
Say those things again. You can cut me out later, but say those things again.
Who would choose alienation from family?
Which does not, that does not always happen.
Rejection from friends.
No, you have the way better friends.
Disdain from the heterosexual world.
Who cares?
Exposure to sexually transmitted diseases such as AIDS and tuberculosis.
We all have exposure to that.
And there's ways to mitigate that, which
right.
Dobson also, whatever. And even a shorter lifespan.
Where's the proof of that?
Well, because I don't know about 2001, but generally during times of especially heightened discrimination, you also have higher rates of substance use and
sure.
misuse. The internalized stress, it just wrecks your body. So I could believe that it's true.
But you're not genetic, because you're gay, you don't have a shorter lifespan, just biologically.
He also says there isn't a gay gene, despite everything you might have heard. Evangelicals love this talking point. You're not born gay. You're not in whatever gay. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard pastors rail against Lady Gaga's Born This Way. They hate Born This Way. It's bop. You're missing out. It's a good time.
Yeah, it's a bop.
If it's not genetic, though, then that means it can change. You might be predisposed to depression, but you can do something about it. You might be predisposed to homosexuality, but you can do something about it. Quote, there are 800 known former gay and lesbian individuals today who have escaped the homosexual lifestyle and found wholeness in their newfound heterosexuality. Which we'll be talking about how that's not true.
Do you say found holes?
Wholeness.
Oh, okay.
If I were to turn heterosexual, I would find more holes.
We should start a podcast called Morals and More Holes.
The holy bone. If the condition resulted from inherited characteristics, it would be a constant across time. Instead, there have been societies through the ages, such as Sodom and Gomorrah, and the ancient Greek and Roman empires, where homosexuality reached epidemic proportions. The historical record tells us that those cultures and many others gradually descended into depravity.
What?
It is a sign of cultural decay that homosexuality exists and is more and more tolerated. It is a disease. He calls it epidemic proportions, descended into depravity. This is super fashy.
Yeah.
This sets the precedence for pretty significant amounts of violence.
Yeah.
If it is a disease that must be eradicated, that's dehumanizing.
Yeah.
And one of the main steps towards extremism against other people is that dehumanization. If I see you as a person, it's much harder to commit violence against you. If I see you as a disease, as an insect, as a cockroach, it's a lot harder to stomp you out. You see that right now with the genocide going on in Gaza. A lot of Israeli government officials will say, these animals, these insects, they're cockroaches, must be exterminated. It's this dehumanization language that you see here when Dobson's talking about homosexuality.
Yeah.
So what does cause homosexuality then? Gender confusion and narcissism. You are gay because you think you're a girl, and you're so attracted to your own self that you seek that out in other people. You're so attracted to your own body, you're so attracted to your penis that you look for that in other people. Again, I don't feel like I need to say this, but that's not true.
That is not true. That doesn't even... I can't even get my brain to even try to understand that.
That's why homosexuals are so faggy, right? Like, that's really what he's saying.
Yeah.
You're so feminine because you want to be a woman. You're confused about your gender identity, which is also why we need men to teach boys how to be men.
Right.
So they're not confused. That's why feminism is so bad, because it confuses boys about their gender ideology. And that's why we're seeing more homosexuals. Also, homosexuals have to recruit, because if it's not natural, then the conditions have to be made. So they want more and more, which we'll get to that in a second. Quote, homosexuality is often the product of a condition described as gender identity deficit, caused by an alienation from and perceived rejection by formative individuals in the subject's gender, which interrupts the normal masculine or feminine identification process.
So because you didn't take a shower with daddy, you're gay.
Very that. It's based on both a rigid understanding of stereotypes and an intense misunderstanding of queerness.
Uh-huh. Also, it does not account, of course, because he wouldn't know anything about this, it doesn't account at all for any type of spectrum.
No, absolutely not.
And it's really just gay men he's talking about, I think.
Well, he says people. He says feminine identification process, but yeah, absolutely gay men.
Yeah, okay.
Quote, these kids, gay kids, often recognize very early in life that they are different from other boys. They may cry easily, be less athletic, have artistic temperament, dislike the roughhousing that their friends enjoy. Some of them prefer the company of girls, and they may walk, talk, dress, or even think effeminately.
This is that idea that gay men are women,
yes.
Right? And it's funny that this is 2001 because I would be very curious to hear what the update is. I mean, he doesn't know gay people enough to have an update for 2024, but 2024. I mean, this is going to be a generalization, but at least in Chicago, 2024. Cis gay men is actually a little hyper masculine.
Yes.
Right?
This idea that it's a gender identity thing that causes you to be gay is untrue, but also has been internalized. And that's part of the reason why you have all these obnoxious mask for mask gays drowning in their own shame. They can't even talk about RuPaul's Drag Race, let alone consider watching it. Like my ex-boyfriend. It's a very Freudian understanding of human development. By that, I mean to say it's deeply incorrect. So, you know what causes it, according to Dobson.
Uh-huh.
How do you cure it?
Yeah, how do you cure it, Jake? I imagine camps are involved.
Mm-hmm.
Great. That's great.
Quote, Mark, the guy from the letter up top,
yeah,
appears to have a condition which we might call pre-homosexuality.
Uh-huh.
And unless he and his entire family are guided somehow by someone who knows how to assist, the probability that he will go on to experience a homosexual lifestyle is very great.
Mm-hmm.
The most important message I can offer you is that there is no such thing as a gay child or a gay teen. But left untreated, these studies show that the boys have a 75% chance of becoming homosexual or bisexual. This is a quote from someone else in the book named Dr. Joseph Nicolosi, who Dobson quotes directly for 6 pages. For those of you in the know, you might have had a reaction to Dr. Joseph Nicolosi. We're going to talk about him a little bit more in a second.
But I do like his name.
It's unfortunately, it's a very good name.
Dr. Joseph Nicolosi?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dobson calls Dr. Nicolosi the foremost authority on the prevention and treatment of homosexuality, and says, quote, I wish every parent would read his book. He also provides links and contact information to his organizations. This is another deep cut that, Brooke, this is not for you, but Dr. Nicolosi, when he was alive, he's dead, thank God, looked a lot like Ray Comfort, who's most well known for saying bananas prove that God's real.
What?
We don't
I've heard this.
We don't have time to get this.
No, I've heard it because they fit so perfectly in the
hand.
Yeah.
Even though it's whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, warning signs of pre-homosexuality. Repeatedly stated desire to be or insistence that he or she is the other sex.
That's not even a okay.
In boys, a preference for cross-dressing or simulating female attire. In girls, insistence on wearing only stereotypical masculine clothing.
It's like he's made a list of stereotypes For people who have never met a homosexual.
Yes.
Okay. Well.
Strong and persistent preference for cross-sexual roles in make-believe play, or persistent fantasies of being the other sex. Intense desire to participate in stereotypical games and pastimes of the other sex. And strong preference for playmates of the other sex. So, first of all, that's not what being gay is.
No, that is not.
Second, he's kind of describing transness.
Right.
Kind of. But also incorrect.
Right.
And put a pin in that. Putting a lot of pins in things today. Put a pin in that. Mm-hmm. To treat pre-homosexuality, according to Dobson, you gotta help them be a man, Dad. Quote, in truth, Dad is much more important than Mom. Mothers make boys, fathers make men. A boy decides that he would like to grow up to be like his father. That is a choice. Implicit in that choice is the decision that he would not like to be his mother. The first order of business in being a man is don't be a woman. Oh, here's the quote. Quote, the father's boy has to do his part to mirror and affirm his son's maleness. He can play rough and tumble games with his son in ways that are decidedly different from the games he would play with a little girl. He can even take his son with him into the shower, where the boy cannot help but notice that Dad has a penis, just like his, only bigger. So, first of all, weird. Second of all, the way that Dobson says to treat pre-homosexuality is just make them conform to traditional standards of masculinity.
Right.
And that will make you not gay. Which my motorcycle riding, car fixing boyfriend would probably have some qualms with, but okay.
The idea that a gay man is a gay man because he wants to be a woman. It's just like,
I know so many gay men who are deeply misogynistic.
Absolutely.
The idea of vagina, you say the word and it's like, they just disappear. They
I've
scatter.
had to talk to a lot of gay men about this. I'm like, I understand you don't want to have sex with someone with a vagina.
Neat. Thanks.
But vaginas are not disgusting.
Yeah.
Like, watch your mouth. This whole idea that I feel like we're about to get into around conversion camps is, I want to talk about how this also affects women. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about like gay women.
No, go off.
I'm talking about like a man repressing his homosexuality, forcing himself to marry a woman, and then bringing that woman into that like fucked up ideal is so abusive in its own way, right? Like a straight woman. Mm-hmm. That's not the fault of the man. That's the fault of the system saying you have to marry a woman, right? But it affects women just as much, like that get, stuck. And conversion camps are proven to never work.
We're going to talk a lot about conversion therapy in just a second.
Okay.
But yeah, so I dated a girl when I was in high school for like 5 months. I still hold a lot of guilt about that because at that point I was grappling with my own sexuality. And I knew that I was gay, but I was like in so in denial. I know it hurt her. I feel bad about that. She's also not a good person, so I don't feel as bad about that. But I do feel bad. It does hurt people. It also hurts like the family around the gay person.
Right.
To see a person in that much distress, to deny that part of themselves for so long, that hurts them and it hurts the people around them.
Yeah.
This was one of the red sticky notes. In 15 years, I have spoken with hundreds of homosexual men. I have never met one who said he has a loving, respectful relationship with his father.
That's... What?
This line stuck with me when I read this book in college.
Yeah.
No wonder my parents, especially my dad, had such a hard time when I came out. I must have felt not only like a personal failure, but a threat to the future of our relationship. It's also... One, deeply untrue. I have a very good relationship with my dad now. I would say it's both loving and respectful. But it also is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
If you're the kind of parent who listens to Dobson, yeah, your gay kid's gonna fucking hate you. Yes. And that hatred only reaffirms your belief that you were correct.
Yeah. It also just is untrue. There are a lot of gay people who do not have good relationships with their parents. Right. Usually because their parents have these horrible value systems, right? But also there's a lot of straight people who don't have good relationships with their parents often because they also have terrible value systems.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of gay people who do have wonderful relationships with their fathers. So like this is again this weird garbage where he's like, I met 5 people who all agreed about this thing, so I'm going to put it in a book. Mm-hmm. Like, fuck off. This is horrifying. I keep thinking about you coming home from college and like reading this book. That's so sad. Can I ask you something? You don't have to put this in. I'm just actually curious.
Yeah.
What is your parents' relationship with this material now?
I don't know, and I don't ask.
Okay.
My younger brother is such a different child than I was for so many reasons that a lot of the things here just like straight up don't apply. And I think they've also evolved in their beliefs and views.
Like, yeah, like that's a really good point. Like, how do you raise this masculine man if there's like intellectual disabilities or physical disability? Like, right? Like, is any of that accounted for or talked about in any way? No. Okay, great.
Of course not.
Good. Yeah.
Because that is also degenerative. That is also a sign of cultural decay. That is not the pure, that is not the best person, that's not the top of the hierarchy.
Yeah.
Have you tried not being disabled?
Right. So this is like eugenics.
We mentioned this in the start of his very first book. The like foreword is written by a celebrated eugenicist.
Wow.
That's who he was trained by. So yes, eugenics fits very well into this. We're also talking about so eugenics is just the idea that humanity, there's an ideal, the best thing. Objectively, this is the best way that humans can be, and therefore we should try to move people towards being the best.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the best has meant white and male and Christian and able-bodied and skinny, put whatever on top of it. Straight is also one of those things. And the way to treat homosexuality is just to eradicate it. That's eugenics. That's the violence that comes with eugenics. That's the violence that comes with fascism.
And when we do our next blog about fatness, we'll talk about gastric bypass as a form of eugenics.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put a pin in that one.
Absolutely. He spends a little bit of time blaming moms for making their kids gay, for smothering their boys or using them as cudgels against their father in fights. And whatever. That's not why your kid's gay. People are just gay.
Yeah, your kid's not gay because mom loved him too much.
I do a decent amount of work with parents whose kids are coming out as trans now. And my supervisor is someone who's done this work for many years. And what she has said, and something that I tell the parents is, when you let go of the why, things get a lot easier.
Yeah.
There's no why someone is gay. They just are.
Right.
Now let's talk about conversion therapy.
Okay.
Because that's what he's talking about. You cannot treat being gay. It's not a disease. It's not a disorder. And attempts to do so are conversion therapy. Conversion therapy is a pseudoscientific practice claiming to help people overcome their homosexual urges and replace them with heterosexual ones. Again, does not work. You cannot do that. Sexuality is fluid, sure, I guess, but you cannot force it to change, and typically not something as fundamental as gay or not. It's a spectrum, it's complicated, it's nuanced. Dobson doesn't care, but that's not his point. The father of modern conversion therapy is a man by the name of Dr. Joseph Nicolosi, who, in case you forgot, Dobson quoted extensively above. That 6 pages that I was talking about, that's who Dobson's quoting. He also, Nicolosi created NARTH, the North American Research Association for the Treatment of Homosexuality. He, it's just torture. I cannot overstate how evil this is. I know a few people in my life who survived conversion therapy, and they're all deeply traumatized about it.
Absolutely. Imagine listeners who are fans of Dobson being forced to go to a therapy to prevent you from being straight. You don't choose straightness. Okay.
Let's get into types of conversion therapy.
Yeah.
So we'll go from that's bad to, oh my God. Up top, making people engage in behaviors that are more stereotypically associated with their gender and limit gender nonconforming behaviors. This is walk a certain way, don't sway your hips, lower your voice, or remove any bad influences from your life. They're like behavioral changes.
So mask.
Yeah, masking. Absolutely. Then a step down from that, confess your sins to Jesus and have him change you. There's a huge religious component to this. Dobson founded an ex-gay ministry called Love One Out. That's right, baby! We're back to Love One Out!
I love Love One Out. I'm gonna go Love One Out right now.
We are going to talk about that in just 1 second. This was advice that I was given. A lot of the advice I was given when I was coming out was just pray more. If you're really a Christian, God will either take this away from you or give you strength to overcome it. There's a famous ex-gay speaker named Jackie Hill Perry who evangelicals love to point to. She's not ex-gay. She very much is a woman attracted to women, still attracted to women, confessed. She's just also married to a man and gave up, quote, the homosexual lifestyle.
Oh, yeah, the lifestyle.
That is what they consider to be a success now.
Wow.
You change your behaviors, you have the strength to overcome it. Jesus helped transform your heart.
But nothing happened. You just are pretending.
Yeah.
Okay.
They try to make this fake difference between same-sex attraction and being gay.
Yep.
Again, there's a point there. It's not the point that they're making. There is a difference between identity and behavior. There are straight men who have DL down low gay sex, but still very much are straight men. That's a thing that exists. Again, that's not what they're saying. That's very much love the sin or hate the sin kind of thing, where like, that's not a real, you're just hating the person. That's just bigotry. That's what they're saying here. And then the very last bit of conversion therapy is the one that people tend to think of the most and is also by far the worst, and this is aversion therapy. This is, much like Dobson's idea of spanking, operant conditioning. You show someone a stimulus, erotic, gay porn essentially, and then you give it with a negative thing. So it could be a bad smell. It could be nausea-inducing drugs, cold bath, burning your skin through branding, labor, electric shocks, among many others. Basically, if you can hurt the person while they're looking at porn, that's the bit. And then you take away that negative stimuli when you show them heterosexual porn or erotic stimulation or whatever. Again, this does not work. None of these things work. It should go without saying, but again, I'll say it, it does not work. You cannot change your sexual orientation. No one can. I have not found a single example of this ever happening once, ever.
Right. You can mask, you can pretend, you can not engage with it, but you cannot make it go away.
Yes.
Yeah.
There have been people who claim this to be true. People who say, I was gay and now God has cured me. They always recant later.
Yes, I was going to say.
Either by choice or after they've been caught fisting someone in the back room of a gay bar. In this book, in this section, Dobson cites a FODF employee named John Polk, who founded Love One Out, the founder of Love One Out. Quote, at one time, he was heavily involved in the gay community, marched in gay pride parades, and was a cross-dresser. Ultimately, John found forgiveness and healing in a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and has walked the straight life now since 1987. In between 1987 and the publication of this book, he was found at a gay bar. Uh-huh. He apologized. Dobson still considers him straight. Dobson's like, his critics love that he did that, but he's still straight. In 2013, he issued a formal apology for his role in the ex-gay movement, dissolved Love One Out, and now openly identifies as gay and a Christian. He divorced his wife, who was also gay, and now believes that conversion therapy is futile and harmful.
Okay.
Every single story about someone who's ex-gay follows these same beats.
Yeah.
They not only do they have this personal conversion, they're then also paraded around by evangelicals to say, see, look, you can cure the gay. And they endure so much shame and suffering until eventually they're like, that's not true anymore. Actually, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
What conversion therapy does is trauma. At best.
And abuse.
Yes. At best, the intense shame you feel for being told who you are is broken, trying everything in your power to fix it and still failing time and time again is incredibly disheartening, humiliating, and soul-crushing. That is why I self-harmed when I was a teenager. Like, it's that pattern of shame and trying again and failing and shame and trying again because it's not something you can change.
Right.
At worst, you've done long-term physical and mental damage to this person. This is especially true with aversion therapy techniques. Trying to shock the gay out of someone is just torture. Conversion therapy is torture and evil and violent, and is only one type of violence that this fascist narrative promotes. This is what we're building to, is the violence inherent in this fascist narrative. Other types of violence in this book, comparing gay people to pedophiles, which this is done in this chapter too. What if a pedophile could claim that he inherited his lust for kids? Does it make his abuse of children any less offensive? The source of their sexual preference is irrelevant to the behavior itself, which is deemed to be immoral and reprehensible by society. First of all, not all societies, which is a problem. Two, not even all evangelical churches. Youth pastors get arrested all the time for molesting kids. So many churches have and still do perform marriages between minors and adults. You're not making the argument you think you're making, Dobson. And also, pedophilia is wrong because it is harmful. Child sex abuse is one of the worst crimes you can commit on a person because it's so developmentally impactful. Kids are not ready for it. Power dynamics, all those things. Being gay causes no intrinsic harm.
Right.
That's why one is bad and the other is not.
Yeah. Oh, God.
He cites NAMBLA, the National North American, I don't know, Man-Boy Love Association, an organization of pedophiles. Although this wretched organization has not been endorsed by most gay and lesbian publications, it has not been condemned by most of them either. My note is, girl, get the fuck over yourself. I condemn NAMBLA.
Yeah.
I condemn pedophilia. Is this better now? Can we have a real argument now? A real conversation?
Yeah, I condemn NAMBLA. If I had to make a list of everything I condemn, it would be the entire website. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are also vigorous efforts by gays to infiltrate the Boy Scouts in the same way lesbians have done so successfully in the Girl Scouts.
What?
The purpose of this Boy Scout campaign is not to permit the sexual abuse of kids in most cases. It is to use scouting to teach and indoctrinate them.
Wow.
Again, this idea you have to recruit people for being gay because they're not born that way. No, you don't. That's not true. Also, let's get into some like fuzziness of language. Boy Scouts of America, prior to letting gay people openly be in the organization, had a long history of sexual abuse. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't even fall in these clean lines of gay people abuse kids. I was molested in Boy Scouts. The person who molested me is a straight guy. Because rape and molestation are not actually about sex, they're about power.
Yes.
And anyone of any sexual orientation can do that. Dobson. He complains that gays in the UK advocated lowering the age of consent from 18 to 16, which sounds bad, and probably is. But the age of consent for heterosexuals was 16. So they were trying to make it even for everybody, which Dobson doesn't mention, let alone criticize.
Right.
Again, you can have your own feelings about that. I'm not in support of that necessarily, but it's not, we want to molest your kids. It's, hey, we're discriminated against here.
Right.
He cites a famous to evangelicals satirical article by some guy with the pseudonym of Michael Swift in 1987. It scared the bejesus out of straight people and was even read into the congressional record and quoted to me unironically. It's a long thing. I took bits and pieces of it. We shall sodomize your sons, emblems of your feeble masculinity, of your shallow dreams and vulgar lies. We shall seduce them into your schools, in your dormitories, in your gymnasiums, in your sports. The family unit, spawning around lies, betrayals, mediocrity, hypocrisy, and violence, will be abolished. Perfect boys will be conceived and grown in the genetic laboratory. They will be bonded together in a communal setting under the control and instructions of homosexual savants. All churches who condemn us will be closed. Our only gods are handsome young men. Since we are alienated from middle-class heterosexual conventions, we are free to live our lives according to the dictates of our pure imagination. Tremble, hetero swine, when we appear before you without our masks. First of all, this slaps. It is what Lil Nas X did by giving Satan a lap dance, which is saying, this is what you think of me? Let me become that and show you just how farcical and nonsensical this is, and make fun of you while I'm doing it.
Right.
And like with Lil Nas X, they completely missed the joke. Literally, when I tell you this was shown to me as evidence of queer people being pedophiles in this 2015.
Oh my God.
Completely unironically. Do these words represent one man's private views, or are they representative of a larger community? I don't know, says Dobson.
It's a joke.
It's a joke. It's big, I'm just asking questions vibes.
Uh-huh.
Very devil's advocate.
Uh-huh.
By making this comparison, Dobson is telling you to not only be afraid of the gays, but implicitly that, if left untreated, they are coming for your kids. Quote, moms and dads, are you listening? This movement, gay rights, is the greatest threat to your children. The greatest threat to your children. That's all but a direct call to violence.
Wow. Yeah, it is.
This is where we're going to start broadening out. This is stuff that's still going on today. And Idaho passed a bill recently making the punishment for child sex abuse the death penalty. Which, you can have your feelings about that. I'm still anti-death penalty for a lot of reasons. But obviously they're not just going to restrict it to people who've actually committed crimes against children. Obviously it's going to be used to kill queer people.
Yeah, for sure.
Because they're quote-unquote groomers.
Right.
Even more broadly, This contributes to an atmosphere of bigotry and hatred of queer people. This is why queer youth disproportionately are homeless. It's why they have significant mental health disparities between queer youth and their cis and straight peers. It puts laws on the books which can result from the murder of queer people, like we just saw in Oklahoma with the tragic death of Next Benedict, the non-binary person who we are still in the days right after this. Information is kind of unclear whether or not they were beaten to death or not, but was beaten up in a school bathroom for being trans in a district targeted by libs of TikTok. So like trans panic was rising and rising, was beaten up in a school bathroom, had to go to the hospital, and was dead the next day.
Jesus.
Whether or not the person actually, like the physical wounds killed this person, or whether they died by suicide or something else.
Right.
It was transphobia that killed them.
Also, again, this idea that pedophilia is queer, right? It doesn't take into any account the idea of any other type of child sexual abuse, right? Which is just straight up offensive and untrue. The greatest threat to your children.
I would, climate change. Guns! Pick your battle.
Donald Trump, right?
Donald Trump, yeah.
Yeah.
Why did I spend so long in this one chapter? First, it's my podcast about my trauma, fuck you. Second, it shows that underneath this folksy rhetoric and academic veneer, it's just bigotry backed by violence all the way down.
Yeah.
We've seen this with spanking. We've seen this with the intense control and isolation needed to subjugate women. We see it here with the direct propagation of conversion therapy. When I was coming out, I didn't go to conversion therapy, thank God, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. Multiple people sent me resources from Love One Out and Exodus International, another ex-gay ministry thing. People I know and love were tortured because of Dobson. I put the blame on him and other people directly.
Yeah.
But also, I spent so much time on this because it's still ongoing. Conversion therapy still exists, even for minors. It's banned in 22 states for minors, in large part due to a personal friend of mine who also survived conversion therapy. But it still happens even when it's illegal, and there are active conversion therapists in 48 states. Mm-hmm. Which ones do you think aren't? pick 2 states you think are going to be like, no active conversion therapists here.
I want you to know.
It's not the 2 you think.
Who is it?
You tell me.
The 2 states that are not... Wait, say it again.
The 2 states that have no active conversion therapists.
Oh. New York.
Okay.
And California?
Nope.
No. Well, I can do better.
I don't think you're going to get... I'll be shocked if you get one of them.
What is it?
Vermont and Hawaii.
Oh, I was going to say Hawaii. Damn it. Yeah.
But also, the rhetoric we hear about trans people today is exactly the same. And it's as bullshitty now as it was then. There's no such things as trans kids. They're pushing an agenda to harm your kids. We got to help them identify with their real genders, assigned by God. That's just gender ideology in different framing. That's anti-wokeness in different framing. It's the same arguments with the same results, with the same violence. If your religious beliefs cause the suffering of homeless and vulnerable kids, your religious beliefs are evil and do not deserve respect or to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Fuck you, Raya Chaik, the person who runs Libs of TikTok. Fuck you, Dr. Joseph Nicolosi. Fuck you, James Dobson. Fuck all of them. You've made the world a worse place. You will never apologize or face accountability. There is blood on your hands in the name of your God. To be clear, this is not a call to violence. I think they should all die natural deaths, just full of shame and ostracization. We're coming out of it. That was...
This was a rough one.
This was rough.
This was a painful one. Mm-hmm. Because this really... Like, the other ones have all been painful, but they're just sort of bullshitty. This is really, This is really dangerous and violent.
This is fascist.
Yeah.
And this is why fascism took hold in the white evangelical community specifically. Because they've been having this rhetoric, these beliefs, this narrative for so long. They've been demonizing the others. They've been having this black and white thinking. They've had these targets who are marginalized, but also they claim have all this power. This has been going on since long before Donald Trump became president.
Yeah.
So they're very wrong. But also, queerness does pose an existential threat to fascist ideology. It shows how arbitrary and absurd their hierarchies are. If the difference between men and women is much more nuanced, why should men be on top? If being gay isn't actually harmful, is it really a sign of cultural decay? Queerness is not the only thing that does this. Fascism is ridiculous and intellectually bankrupt. You see this with feminism, for instance, with critical race theory, the actual meaning of it, not this trumped up whatever bullshit. But queerness is, and has been, a central target for fascist ideologies. While that's scary and depressing, it also gives me a sense of power. Dobson's scared of me. And for as evil as he is, he ultimately is just a coward.
Yeah.
I want to end on like a brighter note because I needed this when I was crying, weeping, typing all of this.
Yeah.
So what now? What do we do?
Well, clearly the answer is interview Ted Bundy.
I would if I could, honestly. I would have a very different interview. Support your queer friends, family, and local queer community. And all marginalized people. Intersectionality means we have a common cause. My experience as a white queer person is very different from that of a straight black woman, but also the systems of oppression impact us both, and we have common cause to unite against that. Push for better legislation, like banning conversion therapy for minors in the other 28 states. Start a podcast and vent about your religious trauma to your friends. To the queer people who are listening, be you. Love proudly. Authenticity in the face of a system that wants you eradicated is radical. That's not always enough, but some days that's enough. Mm-hmm. Me walking down the street holding my boyfriend's hand is a radical act. It doesn't always feel like it in the safety of Chicago, but it still very much is.
Yeah.
And finally, keep hating James Dobson.
Yeah.
That is our podcast. Brooke, thank you for letting me torture you with this.
I love you, Jake.
Listener, thank you for putting up with all of this. Hopefully you have various ways to take care of yourself, because I'm going to go home and smoke a lot of weed.
Fuck you, James Dobson.
Fuck James Dobson. I Hate James Dobson is a labor of love, written, recorded, edited, and produced by me, Jake. I'm honored to be joined by my amazing co-host, Brooke. If you're enjoying the show, please consider rating and reviewing it. And if you want to connect with us more, you can find us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at I Hate James Dobson, and on Twitter at I Hate J Dobbs. Special thanks to Drew, Lindsay, DJ, and Jack. Our theme music is by Mood Maze, and the song is called Trendsetter. Thank you for enjoying the show.
I love the way he says things that are so fucking dirty.
Oh my god. I don't think he means them on purpose.
Of course not.
But part of me is like, you gotta know.
What do you think his secret is?
Dobson?
Yeah, what's his dark secret?
This feels very obvious, but I don't think he actually cares.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's very self-aggrandizing and cares about himself, but like, that's basically it.
Yeah.
And I think he knows that in his heart of hearts, but I think he's too terrified to admit it. That's not very entertaining or juicy, but like...
No, but it's true, right? Like, is it like, it's just about the fame and the... Well, not even fame, but like the being the authority.
Yeah. And I think he gets a sense of like, oh, I'm doing a good thing because I'm helping the world find Jesus, but ultimately it's about me.
Right.
Not about Jesus.
Right.
I wish it was something fun, like he was gay, but that's a
No, I don't think that's true. But he's so threatened.
Yeah. Again, so we talked about this in the very first part. He literally believes he's holy. Literally believes he is like been purified. He comes from a lineage of preachers. His dad, he was having trouble in like late adolescence. His dad dropped his job just to take care of him. So like he has a PhD. His entire life he's just been told, you are amazing, you're perfect, you're so smart, you're so brilliant, you're literally perfect. And I think he knows that's not true. And so all of this is deflection, so no one really sees the insecure little boy inside of him.
Yeah, I think you're right. And maybe he didn't get enough showers with his dad.
Maybe he needed to see his dad's dick more. Or maybe he needed to see it less.
We'll never know.
We'll never know. We'll have to ask Dead Dobson, his dad.
Yeah. Didn't get to see that holy bone.